Morning, everyone. I think this mic is a little low, but welcome to WordCamp for Publishers. We are very excited to kick off our first day of sessions with a talk from Rebekah Monson about building out editorial tools using WordPress. Rebekah hails from Miami, where she is deeply involved in the WordPress and tech community there. In addition to her work on that front, she is also an entrepreneur, and her company, Whereby Us, leverages local media to connect communities, to connect people to their communities. So very excited to hear what she has to say. Please give her a big round of applause. Welcome, Rebekah.
Okay. Thanks. Super excited to be here. WordPress people are my favorite kind of nerds. You care about open source, you care about publishing, you care about the stories we tell on the web, so psyched to be here with you today. So I talked to Adam a little bit about what I wanted to talk about, and I was like, this is not a super sexy topic, right? So fortunately, WP-CLI is happening in a workshop. If you're not using it, it's amazing. Go check it out. But we are largely a newsletter-driven company. Newsletters are sort of at the center of what we do. So we have the Nootropic in Miami, and we have the Evergrey in Seattle. And one of the best and most important ways that we connect with our users is through our newsletters. And so we started those products, like most people do, using MailChimp, because MailChimp is really cool. It has like super awesome reporting, it has a great API, and it's very like user-friendly. So it's really easy to like get things going. But kind of as we grew and as our teams grew, we realized that user-friendly part wasn't quite as friendly as we might have liked. Basically, MailChimp is amazing, and if you're doing newsletter projects, it's like a great product. But it was just one of those things where we started noticing like some flaws in the system, and we had some probs, right? So, for example, let me show you two things. So this is literally like the same ad unit, and do you see they're at the same scale? Like, what size are we supposed to have here? And this is like part of the problem here is MailChimp's WYSIWYG editor, because we have people cutting and pasting things into a WYSIWYG, and it means that you get like hot garbage like this, which, you know, our editorial teams were like, what's the problem? And I'm like, ah. So yeah, and you can see like half of the headline is bolded and part of it isn't. I mean, it's just like a fun like slice of garbage. So, so we had stuff like that, and then, you know, our writers love Google Docs, so they would draft everything in Google Docs, and this is a problem that I think most of us face, right? Like, there's always, like, we cannot escape the cut and paste workflow, which means we get more fun garbage like the ever-present Google Docs span font weight 400 tag, which is like, I swear to God, if I never see this again in my life, it will be amazing, right? So we get stuff like this, and what happens is if they've copied and pasted something incorrectly and there's not a span tag that's not closed, MailChimp does fun things like breaks responsive layouts in Google Mail and stuff like that. So just lots of like fun, exciting things. Plus, I would get these like fun support calls, like, you know, at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, where people are like, "Oh, I changed the formatting, but now I can't change it back." And it would be because they've tagged things multiple times and in different ways, and they don't actually know how to change it. Like, they can open the HTML editor, but they don't know enough about what they're doing to like actually fix the problem that was made in a very well-intentioned way. So I would get this call like, you know, pretty frequently. And then there's just like a lot of like detail to remember every time you're setting up a campaign in MailChimp. And this is like great, and for most use cases, it's perfectly fine because you're not sending out a bunch of emails all the time, but we're sending out a daily newsletter, and we want the flexibility to have like highly curated content and all of these things that MailChimp also lets us do, but there's like a bunch of like little doodads that you have to remember to do. Like, you have to turn on link tracking, and you have to like make sure the social card is set up, and there's just like lots of little bits and bobs to take care of. And all of this results in my favorite publishing problem. You're all here, so you know it, and that is time. So I would have people spending, you know, I'd have teams of two spending like up to an hour on these production issues, which, you multiply that out, I was spending like literally half an FTE work week on newsletter production, which to me is like insanity. We're a very tiny company. We can't afford that. So it was one of those things where it was like, we kind of like we're dealing with a lot of other stuff, and eventually this just, we're trying to scale the business, we're going into new markets, and it was like, we've got to do something about this now before it gets like way worse. So there's kind of like multiple goals out of this project, and that was, the first thing we wanted to do was like automate promos, which are our newsletter advertising spot things. We had already built an app to sort of handle that. We are dealing with smaller community newsletters. They're not really fit for an ad network. Plus, we don't really want to work with an ad network necessarily. A lot of our clients are small businesses, local nonprofits. They're spending a lot less money than you have to spend to get into that ad network buy, right? So they're buying like little packages of spots for $600, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 at a time, which doesn't, they're not going to go through like a national media buyer or anything for that. So we made like a little platform for them to buy, but we were still doing like cut and paste things to get those ads into MailChimp. So we wanted to automate that. We wanted to accommodate the existing workflows of the editorial teams. The Google Docs problem is one that everyone in this room has probably faced. So we know that we're not actually going to get rid of that. They love the tool, it's fine, but like let's think about how we accommodate it from a tech side. And then we wanted to limit the formatting issues. So the WYSIWYG editor is great because if you're doing, your small business marketing email, you have a nice set of templates. You can kind of, make your font pink if you want. Like whatever you want to do, you can do in MailChimp. But when you have a sort of really much more structured product, some of that can be a problem more than it is a benefit, right? Because we get things like weird bold and unbold and weird colors and just all kinds of like fun stuff because people would get creative in ways that maybe weren't quite right to get creative on. And then we wanted to save time. Like that's the biggest thing. Time is our most valuable resource, in a small startup or in any company really. So it's like, how can we like reduce the production load on this product? So the promo stuff, like I said, we had already started. We built this app that was turning out to be really successful. As soon as we launched the app, like we were just getting a lot more sales because it was easier for people who were doing like marketing for a small nonprofit or a small business to come in and just purchase 1 or 2 or 3 spots. It has nice calendars. It has like list functionality. We can make special coupons and make packages for people. So we solved kind of a bunch of those problems that we were handling on the phone. So really, like the promo stuff started with just building an API for this product that we could use for wherever we wanted to plug those things in. So that was already in the works, and we'd already invested in it. So we had some ideas about different experiments to solve some of these problems. So we checked out a bunch of existing services and plugins. Some of these are really great. There's a lot of people who do newsletter things on WordPress. A lot of those plugins in particular are geared toward automating the content that you're publishing on the website. That's actually not our jam. We don't make any money on display advertising on the website at all. And so what we're interested in is doing storytelling in very distributed ways. Sometimes we're linking out to like things that we did on Insta Stories or Facebook or whatever. And it's not really like stuff that we just house within the blog. And a lot of the stuff that we do is aggregation or it's partnership content that we've made with some other group or community group or whatever. And so it didn't make a whole lot of sense just to sort of rely on some of these plugins that are just really driven about like driving traffic to our site. I care a lot less about that than most people do. And so it was like, these things could be tweaked, right? Be hacked around to work, but it was sort of like, okay, well, if we're going to do that much hacking, like let's make sure it meets all of our needs. We also thought about just trying to insert those promos directly into MailChimp and forgetting a lot of the other issues, right? This turned out to be like super more complicated than I think it should have been. And it was like, we'd have to do like these weird feeds, we'd have to make these like weird RSS feeds and then have like these weird MailChimp units that were going to be hard to edit, and it was just like, we scrapped that pretty quickly. We like worked on that for a couple of days and it was like, this isn't right. So then there's always, this is my favorite solution that developers always come up with, which is teach everyone Markdown. So, which I'm totally up for it, by the way. Like, but then I think about like, okay, yeah, we teach everybody Markdown, but that over time becomes like an exponential training load. So, so then we were like, okay, maybe we don't teach them Markdown, but maybe we use Dropbox Paper, which is like really sexy and hot and like puts out content in very nicely formatted ways. We may come back to that piece, but I'll talk to you about that at the end. But it was sort of like this thing of like, okay, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and we're going to have to train people to do things differently than they would, and do we really want to do that? So that kind of got scrapped. And then, you know, hacking someone else's thing kind of fits into the first one, in that it was just like, if we're going to do that, like, let's just do the thing that we need, right? So we kind of tossed all these things, and then we got started, and we kind of knew early on in going through a bunch of those options that we should just probably build something in WordPress. It's super fast for us to prototype and iterate in WordPress. There's no new training for people. They're already familiar with the admin and edit screens as much as you love or hate them. Like, our teams understand them. And then there's like a lot of potential, like the reason that I really was excited about it is there's so much potential for new content types, for better integrations with the stuff that we're already producing, and for flexibility down the line, right? So like, we're sending through MailChimp now, but like, maybe we get really lucky and we get super big and that becomes ridiculously expensive, so we're gonna go some other way, right? So basically all we're doing is having WordPress spit out HTML, which we can send through any provider we want. Plus we have some awesome like things that we can write in as far as control and link tracking and stuff like that. So it just seemed like a really good fit. It was pretty easy, and you know, maybe we don't stay with this forever, but for right now it totally hits all the needs. So the plugin is super simple. There's like a settings screen. So like, we've done already a whole lot of testing around send times. We're pretty comfortable with like what time we're sending things every day. So we're like, okay, we're not going to really necessarily need to A/B test that a lot. Like, let's put all the junk that everybody has in this little screen, and we'll set it forever, and no one has to worry about whether they scheduled something for 7 p.m. instead of 7 a.m. ever again. So that was good. And then it's just a matter of like picking the brand colors. We're kind of like trying to work off of a single template, right? So a really straightforward email template where we change out things like logos, we change out colors. There are flexibility, there's editorial flexibility within these like chunks of content that make up the newsletter, and I'll show you that stuff. But it's really like, how do we simplify the container? Like, how do we make a better box and then let the editorial teams run with the content? So the settings thing was pretty easy. This also, just having it set up this way makes it a lot more scalable. So like, if we wanted to start 5 new brands tomorrow, they could all have newsletters same day. And that was like a big thing for me as well. The screens are like super simple. Everybody gets it. We showed the edit teams on day 1 when we're like, okay, we're ready to train you on this. And they're like, oh, so it's just like a post. And we're like, yes, which is exactly what I wanted to hear. So we're not reinventing anything. Nothing is sexy about this. It's just like, let's use the thing that you're familiar with. And then we have edit screens. Some of these are harder to see than I would like. Sorry about that. There's a couple details. So there's like a date, right? As soon as you save a draft, it creates the campaign and pulls in the campaign ID. And then, you know, we're adding some new stuff really soon about subject lines, so we can do better A/B testing on subject lines and stuff again. But it's basically like all the content that would be in the newsletter, but really chunked out into these like nasty, ugly edit boxes, right? So the reason I know that this is not beautiful, and that is by design. It was like, let's not worry about formatting. Like, literally do not worry about it. We will handle it. Just put the stuff in where you want the stuff to go. So you'll also notice that we have these like nice little boxes up here, this nice little just control thing up here where we get to load in our promotions. There's like a little label that tells you how many there are for the day, so you can check and make sure that you're pulling everything in right. You can send a test email, you can set it to publish, save a draft, and we'll go through some more of that a little bit later. So, like I said, like a lot of what we were doing is just thinking about like what are the units inside the newsletters. Both teams sort of developed their newsletters separately, but it turned out like they ended up on a similar enough format where it didn't make a lot of sense for us to be like, let's make one special for Seattle and then let's make one special for Miami. It was just like there's kind of like 3 content buckets. There's ads in between them, there's a calendar at the bottom, and then there's like an outro block. So we just basically built that. The images were also an issue. So MailChimp had this weird thing where sometimes it would like present your GIF like as a GIF, and sometimes it would just be like some static thing, and they wouldn't know until they got the newsletter like the next morning, and they'd be like, why didn't my GIF work? And I'm like, I have no freaking clue. So we fixed that problem because now they can use the WordPress media library, or they can just use a link. It's totally fine. And again, like we took out like all the label stylings, all the links are styled. They don't have to worry about that stuff. So the other thing that I like about using WordPress for this is, and using just a bunch of different like little meta boxes, is that there's a bunch of like built-in stuff in WordPress that we take for granted. So like link checking in MailChimp was kind of a nightmare, right? They'd have to like look at a preview, and then there's a link checker tool, but it takes a while to load. Like sometimes these newsletters have 50 links in them, 60, I don't know. So now, because we're in WordPress, it's just like a hover situation, and it's a lot easier for them to go ahead and check their work, in addition to checking like when they get the test email in their inbox. So there's like little things like this that just like decrease some of the anxiety that our editorial teams had because they could just see it, right? So let's talk a little bit about our sort of actions here. So the promo thing, like I mentioned, it's useful for them. When we first like started experimenting with this, it was like, how do we know that we have the right stuff in there? Like, because editorial staffers have no idea what an API is, they don't trust that crap. Like, give me some security, right? So we added this little dumb label, which is super fine. When they hit the schedule newsletter thing, it just uses WordPress's scheduler to like set it, schedule it to publish. It's really simple. And then, you can save drafts as many times as you want, and it doesn't change the scheduling or anything because the scheduling's always at like a set time. We'll probably build in some stuff where we can do more A/B testing on times again if we want to, but for right now, it wasn't high on our priority list because we had done so much work on that already. So there's this thing, right? So like when you hit the promo button, it just pulls everything in. It's easy. Like one of the things about the promos also that the editorial teams requested was like, advertisers are writing these things. If they're hot garbage, or if there's mistakes in them, we need some ability to not put horrible things into the world, right? So I totally agree with that. That's totally fine. So it pulls in the stuff, but they're totally able to edit it. That was a big deal. One of the problems with the MailChimp sort of solution of sucking the promos in was that it becomes really hard to edit them. You kind of have to go back into the promo app and edit them there and all that. So WordPress takes that away. There's also this button. If you've already loaded it in and you've made edits and you hit it, it throws an alert that's like, hey, we're going to overwrite all your changes now. So we're trying to dummy-proof this stuff as much as possible. We also realized pretty quickly that we needed to have panic send mode. This is, I don't know if you guys, you've probably worked in places where everyone thinks it's super fun to tear things up at an hour before they're supposed to go out or whatever. So our teams are no different. This is a beloved pastime of all people in news. We must rip it up, right? So every now and then there's this moment where this became a thing where people wanted this ability to pause and then edit some stuff and whatever and then send it off. So we did that right away. But we also made it super obvious and obnoxious and hid it because it's don't use this thing unless you really want to send out an email to 25, 30,000 people. So far there's only been one abuse, but we'll see. This might have to change. So So one of the other big chunks in our newsletter, which is like the thing that we're going to be working on next, is this. I don't know why this is. Sorry, this is like a little. Oh well. We're working on our events calendar, right? So the events calendar right now is curated by hand. It's something that's compiled in Google Docs every day. We have like a producer who's like super into like going to a bunch of stuff around town, and they're kind of culling things and putting them together in this way. Now, that's totally fine, but it takes a long time, and there's an opportunity for us to do a better job of integrating with our calendar, community calendar that we already have, which at least in Miami is starting to get like pretty significant traction as far as like entries and stuff into the calendar. So, whoops, I don't know what's up. Sorry. So we're kind of like missing an opportunity in these cut and paste workflows to do stuff to like better promote the work of our community where they're already interacting with our site, where they're already putting stuff up. We have partnerships with a bunch of different community organizations where we kind of suck their events down and throw them on our calendar and promote them in different ways on social or however. And so our next phase of this is really to build out this event calendar thing, and I'm actually really, really excited about it. So the results of this are pretty like much what you would expect. Like the promo thing is automated. This means I don't have staffers touching that shit every day, which is like a relief and, you know, a very good thing for the business team too, because they're not, you know, there's no mistakes getting inserted in anything anymore ever, which is really nice. We cut production time in MailChimp support requests by more than half. Like, we get almost no MailChimp support requests now. Like, this is one of the hard things when you're using services, right? Like, how often is your team like, I can't figure out this thing in this service, and it's like, read the knowledge base, which has never once in the history of all of publishing ever happened. Like, no one reads the docs except you people and me, right? Like, us. We are the people who read the docs. Everyone else is like, eh. And so when I'm like linking people to docs, they're like, what is this? Just can't you do it for me? So now I don't have to do that anymore, which is nice. The production time thing was like a huge, huge win for us though. The first week that we tested this, the newsletter was done consistently in 20 minutes production time, like every night, and now it's even less than that because people are kind of used to like where things go and how to just bang through it. So the other thing that's really great here is that it's future friendlier. I don't know if that's a word, but whatever, I like it. This is like I was saying earlier, like as we scale and we want to look at different providers and things like that, like we need a way to control all the content and all of the archiving and all of the other stuff. We have that now. The other piece is that there's new functionality that we can put in. So we have some next steps that we're working on. Reporting and dashboards. So this is just using the reporting API stuff from MailChimp to build out our dashboards in such a way that people aren't having to go back and forth. And then adding back in split testing stuff, like which we took out to simplify and get to an MVP of how we're going to handle this. But being able to like do that on our end, again, if we want to move off of MailChimp ever in the future, like it's easier if we can kind of have a little more control over that. The other thing that I'm super excited about is for the existence of the company, like all this newsletter stuff has only existed in the newsletter, which is in some ways a benefit, in some ways a discoverability problem, right? So what we have now is this ability to sort of take these little atomic units within the newsletter, so like an aggregate piece or like a short write-up about, you know, Charlottesville and how it relates to Miami or how it relates to Seattle, and those things become like more shareable. They're able to be kind of live as their own units of stuff somewhere outside of the newsletter context, which is actually, it just opens up a lot of doors for us to do more stuff with it, and hopefully help people share and discover the stuff that we're doing in the newsletter. One of the big problems with newsletters in general is that you don't know what's in them unless you subscribe, right? Or you see it posted on the internet, which is also fine, but what we really want you to do is subscribe. So there's like a trade-off there of like how much do we want to show and share versus keep kind of there for subscribers. But we get a lot more flexibility to make those choices instead of just sort of like saying, it just lives on the MailChimp archive. This also helps SEO and other stuff, right? Because all of your content is back kind of within your domain space. So right now, like our newsletters, before our newsletter archives were like all MailChimp posted, and that was pretty much it. So now they're like, they live with the rest of our stuff. So then there's like calendar and content integration stuff that we're working on. So like I said, the events calendar is one big place where we can use the stuff that other people have done, where it's just like, let's build newsletters out of like the RSS feeds for our blogs and things like that. So that's like an easy win. But then there's other like, I don't know, we make these weird like guide products, which are sort of like aggregated briefs about where the best tacos are in town and stuff like that. Being able to suck those things in, those little brief pieces or whatever, and point people to them directly is going to be, I think, a really fun thing for us to play around with. So we're really looking forward to kind of building out the stuff more. The bigger issue is that our editorial staffers are happier, right? Like, there's a lot to be said for making people feel like their job is easier, and this was like a really great project for us to do that, and they're a lot more eager to like work on some of this other stuff now that we've taken off a little bit of the workload. All right, that was pretty fast. Happy to have questions, comments, love to talk to you about your newsletters. I love newsletters. They're very simple things, but they can get really complicated really quick. So happy to like just take any questions from you guys now. Oh, we use their API. So like we're basically just creating we're creating the HTML within WordPress. So and then we're just shipping that out to MailChimp. Nope. There's a lot of different reasons why we chose not to do that, but one of the okay, cool. Then I don't have to explain them. Yeah, doing it through RSS actually proved way more challenging than just doing it this way. So it's sort of like a thing of like, plus the other thing is because we're just generating the HTML, like using WordPress, it's like much easier for us to like, if we want to make design changes and things like that, it's just a lot easier for us to change everything in one place. That's the basic gist of it. Other questions, thoughts? Yay. It is not open source. There's potential for that to happen. Part of the reason why it's not open source is because a lot of it's built like pretty specific to this proprietary promo tool that we have. Although I have talked with Ernie about kind of taking out some of the other pieces and just making it open source. So we're in conversation about that. I'm a little bit hesitant only because we have a dev team of 2 plus me, and I barely count as anything on the dev team. So it's like, you know, maintaining and caring and feeding for an open source project is a big responsibility, and I'm not sure that we're ready to take that on until we get staffed up a little bit more. But I would love for that to happen, yes. Yes? Yeah, so there's like this test email that we send out. So that goes to whomever is supposed to get the draft. So we're actually like shifting some of our workflows right now around how the newsletter is made. So we're adding in this sort of like storytelling director layer. So there's just sort of like an extra set of eyes in addition to the local teams to sort of help them make sure that we're kind of on brand and all of that. So that draft email goes out to everyone. There's like a touch point. Maybe there's not even a meeting about it really. It's just like on Slack. Like if there's something that people see, it's like, you know, there's like 5 minutes in which everyone's like, fix this, fix that, fix this. Whatever gets fixed, gets fixed. Or if there's like a massive revision, then there's just like a conversation and that happens. But basically it's sort of like the test email goes out to like, it goes out to the business team, right? Because they need to check the promos and make sure they're okay, make sure all the links work, all of that. But it also goes out to like our internal local teams and storytelling teams. And there's just like a moment where everyone has a conversation and things get changed. Another one goes out and everyone gets the thumbs up. That was another problem with MailChimp workflows too. Because it was sort of like, okay, we can send it to you, and then it's much easier for anyone to jump in and change a thing now that it's all in WordPress because everybody works in WordPress already. So it's like MailChimp, we didn't have everyone set up with like the right permissions to like reschedule stuff and things. So it ended up being a lot more efficient on the revision side as well. Yeah. I mean, I can walk you through the process. So essentially, we have a morning stand-up for all of our teams where there's a conversation about what we're making for the day. That's like original content, but oh, yeah, they're getting it daily. They're getting it daily at the same time every day. We've done a lot of work already on send times, so we've had best results around like 7 pretty consistently for any market. So we send it pretty much at the same time every day. And I mean, there's flexibility. There's flexibility for us to change the send time by market if we want, but it's been pretty consistently tested. AM. Yep. First thing in the morning. When you roll over and check your phone, we want to be there for you. So yeah. Yes. So right now we're working with this. So yes, it is published as a public post. We're not surfacing that right now very well up into the site, other than like there's like little archive widgets that we have for the newsletter that we've built kind of around like near sign-up boxes and in a couple of other places. But the next kind of phase for this includes like how we want to leverage that archive, right? Right now we're just building up to a place where it's kind of like a significant amount of content because we were on MailChimp for so long and the archive was hosted elsewhere. So now the other question that we're wrestling with is like, do we go and backfill stuff? So it's like, right now we're pointing them to the MailChimp archive because we haven't figured out what we want to do with our archive yet. Yeah, so it's like, it sounds like we should have a conversation after about the best way to do that because I'm like completely a little bit stuck on it as well. Other questions, thoughts? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, then you probably don't want to do as much external linking as we do. Like, I mean, that's just, I think like you could totally use it to curate, like you could use a tool like this or whatever, however you want to build it, to suck in like your own content. And then I think like the thing that we've learned about newsletters in the publishing space in the past, you know, since the newsletter boom began a couple of years ago, is that curation has like high user value. So you're going to get like more stickiness and better opens in general if you're taking the time to like make your product like feel more conversational, have a specific voice and tone. And the only problem with like automating all of it is that you sacrifice a lot of that. So it's really finding the balance that's right for your organization or your product or whatever. For us, like the newsletter is sort of like the thing that we like hold in our hearts every day, and it's the way that a lot of people like interact with us, you know, and it's like our users, it's the users that are kind of not necessarily the most engaged, but they're sort of like at the top of that pyramid of engagement. So we want to take a lot of time and energy to make that thing special for them every day. Yes? Uh-huh. Right. Right. That sounds like a terrible time to send a newsletter, just from like what little experience I have in it. Does anyone want to read news at 5 p.m. on a Friday? Because like I work in this business and I definitely don't want to read news then. Yeah, I mean, some of these automated solutions would probably be good for a group that doesn't want to put the editorial effort into doing it. It's just really, it's like, to me, that's a zombie product. So if you're not going to put any love or energy into it, like, why do it? So we're not going to. Sure, yeah. I mean, there's definitely, that is, you can totally use that strategy and it works, right? Like, I mean, it's just really about thinking through why and how and when you're going to do it. I mean, I don't think that there's a wrong answer to that question. If they're not going to put a lot of effort into it and they don't really want to have a newsletter, then why have a newsletter that sucks? That's the flip side of that argument. LOL. So you've worked with a lot of like WordPress users, huh? Look, people do things different ways. So one of the things we did was like sit with everybody for a little bit beforehand just to like check in and see how they were building stories and stuff. So yes, there are weird things. Oh, but the Google Docs cut and paste thing, we actually filter out all those garbagey span tags and all of that stuff now, which is like super helpful. A lot of what happens in WordPress, there's a lot less formatting. For our teams, there's a lot less formatting happening in WordPress than we thought there would be or should be. So we've made a bunch of like little tweaks already to the TinyMCE and all of that, so that essentially like they don't have all the header options because we're only using like 2 of them. So just use those 2. Like we're sort of like we're trying to limit and constrain things as much as possible to make the formatting stuff feel really simple and like everyone knows what they're supposed to do. But yes, there are people who do weird things that, you know, you can't always accommodate every weirdness, but the majority of what they're doing is cut and paste stuff and then like weird formatting. But there wasn't anything like super crazy. We do go through a pretty, standard like training workflow with everybody when they're onboarded onto the company so that we can teach them about our storytelling tools. We have a whole suite of like plugins that do like different kinds of stuff that we have to train them on anyway. So like there's basic like story editing functionality that we review with them, and all of the stuff that we teach in that class is like kind of like what goes into this. Yeah. Right. Right. Aha. So the list management is still handled in MailChimp. So so we do a lot of like weird segmentation. We don't send out 15 newsletters, but we do use, so this, I didn't mention this, but all of the MailChimp merge tags work. So we use a lot of like that stuff to target like members, non-members, or specific promos go to specific people and don't to others. So we don't have like 15 things, but we do a lot of the sort of like conditionals that segment audience, and all of that works through this as well, because it just ships over with the merge tag. And part of the reason why we haven't moved to archive yet is because dealing with that merge tag issue on the public post side is like, you know, how do we want to make that work, right? So
I think we have time for one more.
One more question. Yes. How long have we been developing it? We finished the promo app stuff in like June. We started using this at the beginning of August. No, we finished the promo app stuff in May. We started using this at the beginning of July. So it was fast. Because WordPress, like, it's not hard to build this. You're just building something to spit out some HTML. It's not that complicated. It was just like trying to figure out the weight of the problems and settle on a solution. But we've been working on it continuously since. But it was basically like 2 sprints, like 2 2-week sprints, and we were able to like push this out and get everyone trained in using it. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebekah.